Hi, hello everyone. Welcome back. This time we have a challenge versus Mr. Isolated Pawn, and we are playing the black pieces, and we have a Sicilian defense here. So it should be interesting. Now, recently I've been experimenting with all kinds of lines in the Sicilian, and I'm kind of feeling like playing something I've never played before. Let's try d6, and I will try to aim to go for the so-called rouser Sicilian. So knight f6, and the next move knight c6. So I would say that's a very rare system. This is not played too often these days. I think there are Sicilian lines which are much more popular. For example, the knight of Sicilian, which you see quite often in games of top players. The Sicilian dragon is very common. But this line, even though it's very logical, right? You develop your pieces, haven't been that popular lately. But probably undeservingly so. So he plays the move bishop e2, which is fine, but as a rule of thumb, all of the systems which start with the move bishop e2 and short castling against the Sicilian, in general are considered to be harmless. A more principled approach would have been bishop g5, probably going for long castling. Okay, so now I have a choice. Do I want to play with the pawn on e5 or a more solid e6? Let's go for e6. Should be interesting. So this is the so-called Scheveningen structure. These two pawns in the center might look innocent enough, but actually many times in a proper moment these pawns start advancing in the center. So let's castle. He will probably play f4 right now. This is also why he played probably the move king h1 earlier, just to prepare himself for this, to get his king out of the long diagonal. So in the next move I will try, in the next moves, I shall definitely try to deal with my bishop on c8, which is still not developed. So many times this bishop will end up in the long diagonal. So it could mean that at some point I can exchange on d4 and play a move like b6 and then bishop b7. Sometimes also this bishop gets to the long diagonal with a move like bishop d7 and then capturing on d4, then bishop c6. And the third way is to play a move like a6 at some point and then to take on d4 and play b5, and once again it will end up on the long diagonal. So f4 was played. Now let me play the move queen c7. It's a very typical move for the Sicilian. The queen is nicely placed here, is having some more control over this square, so it's always more difficult to push e5. It's also standing on the c file. Later on there might be some pressure if I also manage to bring my rook into this open file. And also just connecting the rooks in the future. So a very logical move. This is also a very common position, which is, I believe, still theoretical, so nothing new has yet been played. He will probably go bishop e3. That's the most sensible move that I can think of, just developing the bishop. Can he play other moves? Well, of course one might argue that the move knight b5 attacking my queen is dangerous, but I can always go to b8. But he played the move f5, which I believe to be very committal, because it gives me the control over this square on e5. So he wants to put pressure against my pawn on e6, but this pawn at the moment is quite firmly protected, so I'm not too worried about this. So the move knight e5 seems very logical. What other moves can I think of? Well, once again, thinking about the development of this bishop, but now I cannot really think about putting it on b7 because then it will no longer protect e6. So let's go knight e5, let's see what happens. The knight, as you might notice, is very firmly placed on e5. It cannot be challenged by a white pawn, which makes it very strong. It can always be maybe exchanged, but even this is not so easy to achieve, because at the very least then I could bring my other knight into the same square. So I don't really think this is too dangerous for me. Of course he can take on e6, but this is not such a big deal. I can always recapture with my pawn, kind of keeping the integrity of my pawns. So while my opponent is thinking, I can tell you guys that today I played a game of full-time control in the Israeli chess league, and I've actually scored a very important victory with the black pieces against Grandmaster Steinberg. And actually this means that if I win my next match, which will be on next Friday, then I will score my final Grandmaster norm. I already got 2 Grandmaster norms. This will be the 3rd one if I'll manage to score this. This is also the final one. So this means that I will get the Grandmaster norm, the highest rank for a chess player, which is a huge honor for me. So yeah, hopefully this goes well. You played bishop e3 in the meanwhile. Okay, so just developing a piece, but this move is a bit timid, I would say. It's not putting me under any pressure. I think a6 is a very sensible move. Just taking control over this square and maybe thinking about pushing the pawn myself, kind of keeping my options. Seems good enough. Let's play a6. Once again, I want to stress that the bishop has a very important role at the moment of protecting my pawn on e6. This is why when I would like to develop this bishop, I will have to take into account this factor. But at this moment, he already maybe is in a good position, so I might even think about just putting it on d7, enabling my rook to be developed into the game, which is also a sensible thing to do. And the last thing that I can also might think about is I want to protect this pawn on e6 in such a way that will allow my bishop to be developed. So one very typical method of achieving this is playing at some point the move rook e8, followed by dropping the bishop to d8 or f8, and then the rook can support the pawn on e6, thus enabling my bishop to be developed. So he played queen e1, trying maybe to bring his queen over to the king side, which is fair enough. So I cannot really avoid him from playing the move queen g3, which is why I think maybe I should just go for counterplay with the move b5, perhaps thinking about the move b4. He will have those ideas to checkmate me with queen g3 and bishop h6. How worried am I about this? That's a question, actually. Okay, let's go b5. I think I must create some counterplay on the queen side. This is a very typical thing in the Sicilian. One side is kind of attacking on the king side, the other one on the queen side. So he can just spend the tempo on preventing the move b4, but then I'm very happy because I managed to give my bishop a developing square without losing any moves. I'm kind of thinking whether I should have played... I could have placed one of my knights on g4 on the previous move, trying to grab his bishop. I'm wondering if I should have considered that more, because now when he will play the queen to g3, I will no longer have this option. So he's taking his time to think. By the way, this guy also from YouTube, probably suggested by the name. So perhaps we will see also his side of the commentary in his video. I'll probably search it later on. So I'm kind of wondering why he's thinking so much, because I think the only principled move here is queen g3. a3 is too slow. I think he should just do it. Probably after queen g3 I will have to consider my steps, because bishop h6 is just a little bit annoying, so I might just play the move king h8 in order to avoid this idea altogether. And I might also, yeah, so he played queen g3. So against the move b4 he has this move bishop h6, which is not the end of the world for me, but I would rather avoid it. So I'll just play king h8 at this point, just to avoid the move bishop h6. There is really no more points for this move. So now b4 I believe is a threat, and I would be very happy to grab this pawn in the center of the board. By the way, you would notice that white is keeping the tension. He's not taking on e6 right away. He kind of waits for the right opportunity to do so. Which I think it's a good thing, because keeping the pressure always makes your opponent uncertain of what you are going to do, because once you make this move, then he knows what you want to do. But when he keeps the option, it kind of makes you wonder all of the time whether he will do it or not. So he played a3 eventually. So once again, my bishop cannot really be developed on b7, so probably d7 is the only option left. Also, I can think about the move like knight c4, harassing his pieces a bit. Yeah, and the good thing about the move knight c4 that I vacate this square for my pawn, so later on I might be able to finally play the move e5, thus taking away the pressure from the e6 pawn, and then I could develop my bishop to b7, which is really the square I want my bishop to be. So let's play knight c4. Let's see how he reacts to this. I think he will take on c4, because otherwise he will have to either give me this bishop or give me this pawn, which are quite important pieces. So he could consider the move bishop c1, but this gives me time once again to play e5, force the knight to retreat, and then bishop b7, after which I think black will have a fully comfortable position. So he's going a bit low on time. He's having 2 minutes, and well, it will shortly be 2 minutes. I have 5 minutes, so definitely the pressure is on him to make his decisions. So bishop takes c4. So I want to take with my queen. The queen is kind of nice there because it's making pressure against his position. Once again, now I think the move e5 just actually threatens to win a pawn, because once his knight will move from d4, I will have the move knight takes e4. So he really needs to figure out what he wants to do with this pawn on e4. The pawn on e4 will be especially weak right now because he is no longer possessing the light squared bishop, and I do. So in theory I can add more and more pressure against this pawn, while it's difficult for him to defend it. So he just played the move rook d1. Is that a blunder? Cannot I just play e5 followed by knight takes e4? Yeah, that seems quite good. Once again, the pawn on e4 is a very tasty pawn, and I desire it, because once this pawn falls the long diagonal against his king, it will be compromised. I'll also have the majority in the center, which I will try to take advantage of. So is there any reasons for me not to take this pawn? I really don't see any. It's also hitting his queen with a tempo, so there shouldn't be any sophisticated tactics. So I'll take it. I'm also maybe threatening to take his other pawn on f5. Also, this pawn is under fire. I think White's position is extremely delicate at this moment. He is having this very slight development advantage, so he might try to use it. So yeah, he plays the move bishop h6, which is a bit I feel like it's a bit of a desperate move. So his idea that I will take and he will play f6, which in itself it's also not the end of the world, because I could just take on f6 at the very least. But I can also just ignore it and play a rook g8. Maybe it's even the simplest solution at this point. Rook g8, and if he takes on g7, then I can recapture. That seems easy enough. Let's just do this. Not even compromising my king position even the slightest. Yeah. It's very important, even when you have a winning position, to try and reduce the amount of risk you take and just try to play it simple as you can. Even though I'm quite sure that also taking the bishop was also quite okay for me. But this should be easy enough. His bishop is practically forced to retreat at this point. Maybe he wants to go on g5, but he played rook e1, hitting my queen. So some traps might be avoided. So for example, I can now take on h6 with the point that I attack his queen, but then he will take my rook on g8 and he will take my queen, and at the end of the sequence of moves I think he will be ahead in material. So I can just take on c2, which is perhaps the simplest solution. I can also play the move queen h4 to simplify the position, because I think it practically forces him to exchange queens. Let's play queen h4. I kind of think that maybe this is the most depressing move for white to face. So yeah, he found this queen f3 move, trying to counter-attack my rook. I can very simply move my rook away, and then I'll have a free developing move with bishop b7. And once my bishop is reaching the b7 square, remember my words, this bishop is going to be a killer piece. So okay, so I really feel very comfortable about my position here. I am having a pawn up, but also probably the better position. My rook, though, is not doing too much on b8. Let's put it on a more active square. Bishop c3 is played, trying to block out my rook. I can actually try to be inventive here, try to make a maneuver like this, maybe bringing my rook to a more active square, but then I'll have to face some slightly annoying moves like knight a5. So what I really want to do is at some point start pushing my pawn. So what I'm going to play here is the move f6 probably. So this looks a bit weakening, but this just safeguarding my pawn before advancing it. Probably not the only available plan, but this is the one which is appealing to me. So he played bishop to b4. One more good thing about the move f6 that it blocks his pawn. So now I want to play the move g6. You might notice that the bishop on b7 is a great piece, but my rook on g8 is still asleep. And now he's joining the fight with a great force. I think this position is already resignable for white. I just don't see any way to maintain the pawn on g2. So rook f1 is played. So at this point I can just take on g2 and I win his queen. Maybe I can even think about more. Yeah, I think all moves are winning here. I'm not even sure why he's continuing playing. The move queen c4 is nice because then I'm forcing him to exchange queens. I feel like this is a very precise move. I don't know why. Let's try. Queen c4. If he's denying the exchange of queens, for example queen f2, yeah, now I will take on g2. And this is much stronger because at the end of the variation the rook on f1 will hang. So I'm going to take this guy, and I think right now he should resign. If not, it will be very painful for him. This bishop, as promised. Wait, we have a checkmate on the board. Queen takes f1. Let's write the guy. Thank you for the game. And as promised, the bishop on b7 is really the star of the show here. Oh, he resigned before letting me execute my checkmate. That's just rude. That's just rude. So yeah, we'll write the guy thank you for the game. Let's take a quick analysis of what happened. So the move f5 in the opening, as you remember, I said I didn't like so much because it gave me this anchor square from my rook. Yeah, so the engine is suggesting something interesting. He says just to play b4 and to react to the move bishop h6 with the move knight g6, which is funny. And wow, just to take back on g6. And kind of saying, well, yeah, I sacrificed a piece, but now your bishop is hanging, but also the knight is hanging. So white probably will lose a pawn in this sequence. This is interesting, I didn't see that one. So king h8 is the kind of a more human move, but now the engine said the position is about equal. But starting from this point, he started kind of losing the thread. I think, yeah, this move was a blunder. So the engine said he should have just taken on e6 and played the move e5, which I think is not very intuitive move because I have the two bishops advantage, and the move e5 really helps me to open up even more lines, more diagonals for the bishop. Yeah, because after the move rook d1, the pawn on e4 fell. I feel like starting from this point he was already in a losing position. So anyways, hope you enjoyed this game. I surely did. if you want me to change the formats of the game, or you have some ideas or things that maybe some chess variants you want me to play, or some chess different time controls, just let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye, guys.